Thanks, Jackie. I have just been sitting here enjoying everybody's talk so much. I forgot I was talking. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I'm Jessica. I'm also known kind of out there as a penny pinching pathologist. I'm a middle school speech language pathologist in Rochester, New York. It's funny how when you start to describe yourself, you kind of think of who you are to other people. I was like, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, because all of these roles have significant roles in my life. So a sister, a daughter, a friend, a wife, a mom. I have 3 kids, 7 and under, so I'm busy. 5 years ago, my father passed away suddenly, and I then started having to like quickly help figure out about like money and next steps and what was she going to do, because he generally did a lot of he was the main breadwinner in the family. She did a lot of like paying the bills and all of that, but figuring out what to do with his company and figuring out what to do with his retirement accounts and all of that became something I helped her research. um, and again, the family business that had been primarily run by my dad, we had to decide, like, that was his other baby, like, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to end it? Are we going to keep it going? And we eventually decided to try to keep it going with a lot of his colleagues. But figuring all that out was a whole, I don't know, a little bit of a stressor, like when he passed away, but also a blessing to keep him alive in that way also. So a few years ago, also my mother-in-law had the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, and she was diagnosed with colon cancer. The reason I'm bringing that up is because she had surgery for her cancer, and then the Alzheimer's like took over, and it was a very fast downhill battle. So that was just a very shocking situation, and I became her primary caregiver as well during that time to help organize her finances and help my husband figure out like what to do next and what to do with her house and all of that kind of thing. There was a long laundry list of things to do that I kind of started to realize it's time to figure out finances for myself, for my family, to get it under control. So I'm not at this point in my life where other people are trying to figure it out for me. Because it's a lot. It's a lot for any family to do that for themselves, but you got to start somewhere. So that kind of started me thinking about all of this. Just since the pandemic this past year, I learned about retirement. I learned about how to start doing that for myself and looking into what the options are out there. And I think it was March last year when I found Teach and Retire Rich podcast, and I am so grateful. I was telling them right before we started, I binge listened to like the entire podcast, and I got so much great information. All of the ladies on this conversation were featured at some point on that podcast, so I encourage you to go back and listen to everyone's story in a little bit more detail there. But I'm now passionate about trying to learn a lot and spit it all back out and teach other people what I'm learning also, because it just seems like Dan says a lot on the podcast too, you don't know what you don't know. And what is great about this panel is we're all very open to being a little bit vulnerable and talking about our mistakes and what we didn't necessarily do right, but that gives us so much ground to figure out how to get on top of it and how to do it better. So I appreciate being part of that also. And I kind of want to encourage anyone that's comfortable in the chat, if there's something that stuck out to you with anyone's speech so far, to talk about like maybe a mistake that stood out to them that they kind of related to, anything like that you're comfortable sharing, because I think admitting kind of where we're identifying and where maybe our pitfalls are, that'll help us kind of start to climb the ladder of our own financial future. So some of my mistakes, I was kind of a ridiculous teenager, and I was like, I need to go to this school for grad school. I need to figure out, how to get the best kind of thing to put on my resume, this private school, which was ridiculous because it was all student loans. So that's something that, I'm still paying for. And I wish now as an adult that I could have talked to myself and say, nobody's going to care what school you went to. Like in my field, there's so much need to have speech language pathologists. Nobody cares. Nobody cares where I went to school. They just want me to be educated and get into it and get working. Again, something that I now see as a mistake is that we bought more house than we could afford when we got married, and that led us to paying extra money in insurance for our mortgages. And I wish I wasn't throwing that extra money away, in the beginning of our marriage, but luckily we were refinanced. So once we admitted that was a mistake, we were able to kind of recently refinance and get out of that. Another one of my mistakes is, again, like Tara said, I was on that Dave Ramsey train, and he's initially like super motivating to like get out of debt, that whole no nonsense thing. But it's all kind of thinking about the present and like attacking things in the moment and getting out of debt. Yes, to set yourself up for the future, but not setting yourself up for the future as far as investing at all. Like that, I agree, was a big mistake, and I didn't do anything until this past year as far as investing. Other than I had little 401ks from jobs I had before school, and I just kind of let them sit out there. I never knew what I invested it in. I never knew what kind of account it was. I didn't know the difference between an index fund and anything else. I just was like, okay, this is what's out there. I'll just pick one that looks good. I have no idea what all these names mean. I didn't research anything at all. I just was like, this looks good. It was overwhelming to me. I didn't know where to start, so I just chose something. Again, so recently I decided I am in a school system and I do have a pension. And my entire time working in schools, I thought, well, I'll have a pension, so I don't have to think about retirement. I don't need to worry about that. My pension will take care of me. I spent a lot of time as kind of going back and forth in different one-year contracts with part-time or taking a year off when I had my son, spending a lot of time part-time. And that was a choice for my family, but I did not understand how that time off would impact our retirement plan. So we didn't have a retirement plan, but now looking back at it, I wish I kind of would have thought about that, had a plan, and just known, not that I necessarily would have done anything differently, but I would have at least known how to plan ahead. So what I wanted to focus my last few minutes on here was that women continue to be the primary caregivers in America. So like I kind of talked about, I help take care of my mother, my mother-in-law. A lot of women stay home to take care of their kids, which is why I've decided to be part-time a lot, especially this year. Caring for aging parents, disabled family members. And like I said, during COVID, a lot of us have figured out how to work and to be virtual teachers with our kids. So we're home more often than the men in our lives are. So I just wanted to show you a couple. I'm not going to read this to you, so I'll give you a second if you want to read this to yourself. But the general idea is that because there isn't a lot of care in our society for elder care, there's not a lot of resources out there that help take care of that. It falls on, a lot of times falls on the women. Okay, again, as far as this COVID related piece, a lot of us are, it says more than 70% of parents with children under 5 reported the child care provider was closed or operating on a limited basis in this other article here, which, I mean, it makes sense. During this pandemic, there's not going to be a lot of daycares as accessible and as ready. And even though, another part of this article goes into, even though that half of the workforce in America is women, 4 times as many women left their jobs last September. So that's just kind of interesting things to kind of put everything into perspective. Like we do end up covering a lot of roles. Again, in January, 80% of the people that stayed home were women. And then in December, I think it was almost 90% of the people that stayed home, or of the jobs that were lost, were women's jobs. Okay, so here's getting personal. This is my actual pension. I wanted to show you guys, I worked on and off like since 2011 in the school system. Sometimes I was in private schools where that doesn't show up on here, but this is my state pension in the New York State Teachers Retirement System. So you can see, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years here of time. But if you look over on the right-hand side, I was not given 8 years of credit because I was part-time a lot of that time. I did not realize how much that would impact, again, like I said, my retirement. But it does, because here is 8 years of time out of my life that I devoted to different schools. But my service time and how that factors into like your pension and how you figure out your retirement from your pension only gave me credit for 4 years and 4 months out of those 8 years. So that's kind of shocking when you look at, okay, don't get overwhelmed when you see this formula. You have a formula here, and this is my specific formula, so you'll want to look at your own if you have a pension, but just this blue, red, and yellow at the top here, your pension factor, which I kind of copied and pasted the definition of what that meant, times your age factor. So depending on when you say you're going to retire, you're going to multiply it by a certain percentage here, and then your final average salary. So with my pension, it's my 3 highest consecutive school years salaries. So you have to multiply all that together to figure out your maximum annual pension. So just real quick, I wanted to show you guys, if I say my 3 highest years was like $90,000, I had 30 years of credit, you look at that and I'm retiring at 60 years old. So then I try to, play with the numbers and figure that all out with my formula here. And it shows that, okay, I'd have $46,800 something every year when I retire. that's not bad, right? So even if in my head, I was thinking, even if I'm part-time now, I can, start working full-time closer to the end and have that kind of highest 3 year salary. But no, no, no. It's not going to work that way, because you have to figure in that 15 years credit. Like, let's say I'm working part-time or I take some years off. And so instead of that 30 years credit, I have 15 years credit when all is said and done. It drops down to 19,500 something dollars. So that's not necessarily enough to live on, So I need to have another plan. I can't just assume I'm going to have $50,000 like the other example. I need another plan. Would I change anything with what I did? Maybe not. Maybe this, this is what I would have done anyways, because I wanted to spend time home and I had that ability with my husband working. But not being aware of it and seeing the numbers later was a kind of a hit to the face, a punch to the stomach. So again, that is a difference of over $27,000 every year, just not being aware, of what's going to be happening. Scott was so gracious to put this together for the SLP event, and I just wanted to kind of show you real quick. He figured all these, like, say you took 6 months off after having a baby or something, you're not putting in, it's like $1,276 you're not putting into your pension. Over time, that amount of, or no, that you would be losing from your pension. So then over time, Scott, feel free to jump in if I'm butchering this. If you think of like 30 years of retirement later, you'd lose $28,000. So when you kind of think of just the little bit that's a change here, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but over time, you think about compounding interest and all of that, it's a big deal. So just not necessarily to scare you away from doing what you want to do, but being aware to make a plan. Okay, some other tips that we kind of put together, all four of us ladies kind of talked about putting some of these helpful tips together. If you are staying home and you don't have an earned income, you can participate in a spousal IRA. So I don't want to overwhelm you guys with details, but just know that's something you can look up, and that's something that you do have access to. When you get married, everyone plans on staying married. You don't get married and assume you're going to have a divorce. No one plans on that. So starting now with like making healthy financial decisions is not indicative of any kind of lack of faith in your relationship. Because I feel like a lot of people that when they start talking about this, they're like, oh, but I trust my husband to do it and all of that. But no, like, we need to know at least some of this. And my relationship, like, I'm the one that's into all the money stuff. But I want him to know everything too. I want him to know how to get into every account. Like, what if something happens to me? He needs to know what's happening. God forbid, like with COVID and everything, what if I can't do anything for a few months? He's got to know how to pay the bills. He's got to know where our retirement accounts are. Similarly, working together to have at least that basic understanding of the budget, like what comes out of your account every month, like what is that total amount? How are you paying bills? Is everything automatically coming out? Do you send checks? Do you have to go into your bank account, do it every month? Having that basic knowledge is very helpful. And then I was told also, I didn't even know this, but if you're getting divorced and you were married for at least 10 years, a lot of times you're eligible to collect half of their Social Security. So just helpful tips to kind of have going forward. My action items: do you know how to access your pension or any of your retirement accounts? I think I'm echoing Jackie said this also. Log on. See if you can log on to each thing. That's it. You don't have to understand it all. Just figure out how to log on. Another thing, if you do have a pension or you do have a retirement account that kind of can give you those numbers and you can kind of figure out some details there, play with it. Like, what's your pensions formula? When might you hope to retire? What might that look like for you? So again, some of my favorite resources. I love listening podcasts and YouTube. I have a lot of favorite books. So this past year, I've been very busy absorbing everything I could. If you want to reach out to me, feel free with my email right there. I did start a YouTube channel, kind of trying to share as I'm learning some of this stuff. And I'm on Facebook, Penny Pinch Path, and Instagram, Penny Pinch Path. So I'm not super active, but I'm trying to get used to some of those social media platforms. So I will see it if you message me there. I'm going to kind of open it up now if we wanted to take a couple questions. I know we're running, what are we, right at 8 o'clock? So let's see. I believe Dan and Scott were monitoring some of these questions.
Yes, we've got several on a board that we're keeping. And if anyone else has more questions, please post them in the chat. But before we get to the questions, I want to just thank you for that. Was just so honest, so amazing, and powerful. And I learned a lot. Scott and I were direct chatting with each other, like, oh my gosh, I'm learning this, I'm learning that. I knew you four would kill it. Fantastic. Scott, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Why don't you do the questions and then I'll post new questions that come. Okay.
Okay, great. There's one directed at Jackie. So how does someone save money without their partner finding out?
Oh, I knew you were going to pull that one first.
I couldn't resist.
Okay. So let me so if it's a partner, it could possibly not be a spouse, which means that they don't necessarily have to know everything that you're doing. So I'm going to answer as if it wasn't a spouse or whatever. With, you know, when you're married, it's really not going to matter if you hide the money. If you get divorced, it's probably going to come out. Like, my husband wasn't hiding money. I think it was Dan that asked me this on his podcast, but they're like, so do you think your husband was hiding money? No, he wasn't hiding money. I was just not keeping up. But if someone did proactively try to hide money in a divorce, it's going to come up through the divorce unless they are, you know, burying it in the backyard or something like that. So first of all, when you set up a retirement account, that's an individual thing. So even if you wanted to have your spouse or your partner or someone else on there, you can't. It's individual. You know, an IRA is an individual retirement account, a 401k or 403b. That's to the individual. So you can't have someone else on there anyway. Now, you can set up a beneficiary, obviously. So if something happens to you, you're going to name who will get it. If the account is with an employer, 401k, 403b, or whatever, if it's with an employer, it falls in the ERISA rules, meaning that if it's a spouse, your spouse automatically is the beneficiary or gets the money if something happens to you. It doesn't matter who you named. If you named your kids, if you named your girlfriend, if you named your boyfriend, it doesn't matter. If it's under the ERISA rules, meaning through your employer, then that's who's going to get it. So when you set up the individual account, they're not going to say, who do you have to tell? You just set it up. And it would be equivalent to setting up a checking account by yourself. So as far as keeping it from them, I don't know, because I try to always be honest and transparent. So that's all I can give to that one.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. We've got a question for a couple questions for everyone. Well, actually, let's go with, would you recommend investing through a 403b and or a 457 if the district offers both? There's probably some caveats here. Probably depends on the person. Who among you four wants to tackle this question first? Tara?
I'll do this one just because I literally just signed up for a 457 like 2 weeks ago. So some of you may know I have been advocating to get better 403b and 457b options at my school because we only had really high priced options. So first of all, look at what you have. And one way to know if you have a high priced one is get your vendor list. If you don't know how to do that, email HR and say, can you please send me a list of our 403b/457b vendors? Get that list, screenshot it, and post it in the 403b Wise Facebook group, because people will tell you if you have like Vanguard, Fidelity, a few of them, they'll tell you those are the good ones. They'll tell you right away. So we didn't have any good ones. And I was like, okay, well, now what? Now we do have good ones. And here's one thing to think about. Do a little bit of research. Dan or Scott, can you post, you have online modules about 403b and 457b, right? So I won't get too far into it because I don't want to take up too much time, but you can learn more about the difference between 457 and 403b. But one thing is, if you have both, you're going to also be paying account fees on both of them. So I think for Aspire, the account fees were like $40 or $60. If I had both a 403b and a 457b, I would be paying $40 or $60 on both of those every single year. But one thing to look at is, what are your goals? If you think that you're going to be retiring earlier, you're probably going to want to look into that 457b. I don't know if I'm going to retire early or not. I just like options. So I went with the 457b just to give myself a few more options. But once you learn about that, look at your vendors and see what your goals are. But you'll be able to learn a lot just through their modules, because I had no idea what a 403b or a 457b was. And I learned everything I could need to know from their podcast, from their website, from the Facebook group. Everybody is so knowledgeable and so helpful. But once you learn a little bit about that, just look at who your vendors are and see what your goals are, and you'll be able to figure it out. It's not difficult at all.
Danielle or Jessica, do you have a different answer or another, some more context?
I was going to say, it's really up to the person, like Tara was saying, but not to throw a monkey wrench into it. But in a lot of cases, the Roth IRA, which you invest outside of your paycheck, you do that on your own. For many people, that might be a better choice. So if you're doing that research, you might want to look at the Roth IRA, see if that's better. If you don't have good choices, especially if you only have high price vendors, the Roth IRA, you could go directly to Vanguard, Fidelity, or another vendor.
Yeah, and I'll just say for myself, because I was doing like year-long contracts at different districts and I was overwhelmed. Like even when I had simple options with the 401k back before I was into the schools, I was overwhelmed. So once I started learning about this, and I knew at that time I wasn't in any permanent kind of role, starting a Roth at least made me feel like I am doing something. And there are easy ways to start a Roth. And it's even nice because like the limit that they put on how much you can put in each year in a Roth is 6,000. So I felt like that was kind of a goal I could set for myself right away. Like, can I get to 6,000? So it was like right away I had a goal to do more than just guess. Like I had a specific number, I had a target. So that helped me right away. And now that I'm in a permanent position, I'm trying to get some of those better options in that permanent.
Yeah, I just had one quick thing. So you could invest in both a 403b and a 401k, right? I mean, if you had that much space in your wallet where you could invest in both, you could. But are they usually through the same provider, the 401k or the 403b and the 457, or is it different providers?
A lot of times it's different. Like you do have state options for 457. Like for me in New York State, our pension or our 457 option is super low cost, and that's like my passion and my fight right now is to try to get access to that. But my school district doesn't know much about it, so they're not opening it up to us yet. So yeah, but there are certain companies, like I think Fidelity has a 457 option. Is that right, Scott?
Yeah. It really depends. It really depends on the school district and if they're the same.
Yeah, so it looks like there's a good video on that where you guys kind of covered the differences. But, coming from corporate America, all I had access to was a 401k. So even if I wanted to do something else for 457, I didn't have that option. And I would have to, I went to a Roth IRA that didn't have anything to do with my employer. So.
The Roth IRA is great. We love that. So a couple questions here. One, I'm just going to answer real quick because I know the answer and I can get to a question that I think you guys will like. So second year SLP, and I have been so focused on student loan debt. Recommendations. Oh, wait, actually, that's not the question I was going to ask. Sorry, that's the question I'm going to get to in just a second. Question, looks like I can do either a Roth or traditional 403b, so pre-tax. Will that mean I will pay fees for both accounts if they are the same company? The answer is no. You can make your contributions on a pre-tax or a Roth basis into a 403b account, and they'll just record keep they'll keep the accounts separate within that account. You'll only have one fee. It's only if you have two separate like plans. So here's the question actually that I wanted to ask. So second year SLP, and I have been so focused on student loan debt. Recommendations for how to start investing. Since Tara went first last time, we'll start with Jessica. I know both Jessica and Tara are SLPs, so probably have something, but I know all four of you have something great to add.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't even say that's specific to being an SLP because especially if you're in a school, you fall under that umbrella that all of the teachers do as far as these options in your school. But research a little bit, understand the basics of what a 403b is and your options. Understand if you have a 457, what that means. Understand a Roth IRA you could do today out of your bank account. You could set something up in 15 minutes and start a Roth IRA. It's not hard, and you don't need that to be tied to your employer. So just kind of see what you're comfortable with. Figure out, do you want to save taxes now, or do you want to like go ahead and pay taxes on the money and save it later, like in retirement? So you just got to kind of figure out where you're comfortable and just start there, just start somewhere. Because I feel like I've heard a lot of people say the best time to start investing was yesterday, but today's the next best day. So just start, just get started and you're fine.
I'll go next. Yeah, so I talked a little bit about, the best places to start saving. And I believe that we are a generation of multitaskers. So you don't just have to do one thing. That student loan debt is going to be around for a really long time. And right now, if it's in the public student loan system, if it's a government U.S. Department of Education loan, you don't even have to make any payments and the interest is 0%. And so if there's ever a nice opening for you to start investing, now would be a good time. And I always say start with your employer because they make it automatic, they take it out of your paycheck. Now with 403Bs, it's going to depend on your district, and if you have a crappy one, if you have a good one. If you have a crappy one, Dan and however you guys normally would recommend, but it sounds like if you have a crappy one, it's not going to get changed overnight. So I would start maybe with a Roth IRA, start off with something outside of my employer, unless you were getting a match. So if you were getting a match, you don't want to pass up the free money. Bad fees typically does not outweigh you getting, free money from the match. So if you're getting a match, take that. If not, then just, open up an IRA, either traditional or Roth. If you're in a very low income, let's say under $80,000, it might make more sense to do a Roth IRA. You won't get a tax benefit now, but all that money grows tax-free, and you can take it out later tax-free. So that would just be my thoughts.
And I just wanted to add, because I heard Tara beat herself up for paying off debt and someone else. I just wanted to say that if you're paying off that debt, like, I feel like you should be proud of yourself, because it's such a monkey on your back. And it's something that there's a bit of psychology involved. Like when you owe something, it weighs you down. So if you were able to do that multitasking, like Jackie said, and just do, if you're able to split it or just do a little bit, just getting some investing is a good way to go while you're doing both things.
One thing I'll add to that too about how to get started is I posted on my action lists, just open up a Roth IRA. I just did one a couple weeks ago, that too. I'm just doing it all. It only took me like 10 minutes and it wasn't super financially technical. And the great thing is a lot of things you could Google or YouTube. If there's a part of it that you don't understand, just go on Google, go on YouTube. They will explain it and you'll be able to work yourself right through it. But two other things I just wanted to say is A, make a habit out of investing. Put that money away before you even see it. Like you can't miss something you never had. If there's any way to automatically put money into an investment, do it. Put your money away. You'll never miss it. You never saw it. And the other thing is, if you do have a great 403B or 457B, always set it up to contribute a percentage of your income and not a flat dollar amount, because most schools, you're going to keep rising on the step schedule, or you may get raises every single year. If you have a percentage, you are going to continually contribute more and more money every year without even having to do anything. I also recommend, if you do have more money, look at it, maybe up that percentage, but don't just set it to like $50 a paycheck and never look at it again. Set it to a percentage so it's automatically going to increase. And if you can, maybe up that, but just get into the habit. That's the biggest thing. Get into the habit and put your money away before you even miss it. And you could always change it. It's not like we've been putting away more money personally now because we don't have kids. That's a big money sucker. So we've been putting a lot of money away towards retirement. And that's okay, because as soon as our financial situation changes, boom, we can change it. And we don't have to be putting away that much money. It may take like 1 or 2 paycheck cycles to go through. It's not immediately instant sometimes, but you're not locking yourself into these things. So just put it in while you have it, get the money in the market, and then do what you can from there, but just get started.
Thanks, Tara. Before I go to the next question, I did want to kind of give a shout out to next week. We actually have a workshop or an event on the public service loan forgiveness. And probably the question that I just asked everybody might be a good one to ask there as well, because sometimes actually contributing to a pre-tax 403B or 457 can help you in terms of public service loan forgiveness. It sounds counterintuitive that putting money into a pre-tax plan is better than paying off debt. But because of the way that program, the unique features of that program work, it could. So maybe attend next week and ask that question as well. We're starting to get some other questions here. How do you get I love this question. How do you get a spouse on board to get financially knowledgeable if they are uninterested? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can actually just start. I feel like once you start learning about it, you become more interested. Like when you join a Facebook group and you see what other people are doing, or I started listening to, I had never heard of the FIRE movement, and I stumbled upon the Choose FI podcast, and I thought, whoa, this is a thing. I didn't even know what it was. And then I started just listening a little bit here and there, and I just started to learn more, and it became kind of part of my mindset. I think if it's education is key. Like find something that you think your spouse would be interested in, and there's so many different ones out there. I think Teach and Retire Rich is great if he's a teacher. If your spouse isn't a teacher, it depends on what your goals are and what your things are, because Choose FI and the Dave Ramsey podcast are kind of two opposite kind of philosophies, but at the same time, they both have value. They both have some good advice there, and you can decide what works for you. But also, I also think it helps, besides the education part, is to focus on why you're saving. Because if you're just talking about, we're saving for retirement, and it just sounds like this thing that old people do, and you're just going to sit around the house all day and do crossword puzzles, it doesn't sound all that exciting. If you talk about start setting a goal, I want to retire by this age, and this is my dream, I want to do this, and you focus on the fun part of it. And then maybe even having a shorter term goal. We want to save for a specific vacation once this stupid pandemic is over, or whatever it is. If you set some goals, then maybe you'd be more willing to talk about it.
One thing I would add to that and piggyback, I would also ask yourself, why are they not on the same page? Is it because they just don't understand? Is information a barrier? Share some information, some podcasts, get them a little bit of knowledge going. Is it because they don't want to be interested because they don't really care? They don't understand about the future. They don't have any plans to retire early. Are they not on board because they kind of want to keep you in the dark, or they just want to manage everything? Or do you guys have different goals? Are they a big spender and you're a big saver? I think one of the biggest things is ask yourself why, and see why they're not on the same board, and kind of make your starting point there and see if you can bridge any gaps.
And I think for me, I was the uninterested spouse when I was married. And I think, Danielle, you were talking about the end goal. I think showing them the end goal could be sort of the igniter or the opening to talk about it, because everybody wants to plan for their vacation. Everybody wants the great new house. Well, if you start backing into it by looking at what the end goal is, that's what made a difference for me. If I knew that it meant I could get this, but we just need to talk about the financial part of it. It's like, okay, it was the means to an end. So that's kind of the one thing that got me to be willing to talk about it.
And I'll just say, your spouse better than anyone, so what makes them tick. Like for my husband, he would way prefer that I handle all the details and he never have to think about it. But giving him, I know my husband is super competitive, and we do all kinds of things where we're playing games about different things, even chores around the house. But when we made it a visual, I made it a thing, we both opened up the Roth IRA at the same time and decided let's see who can fill it. Let's see if one of us can fill it first, and made it a thing. So when he would get a big bonus, I'd say, all right, if you want to put your fund money, whatever you want extra into your account, that makes sense. So we would kind of budget together and figure that out. And then when I would get a little bit extra with the family business, I'd throw a little chunk in my Roth IRA. So we're kind of trying to see if either of us can hit that limit. So far we haven't, but at least it gets them motivated. It got him motivated in a different way.
That's great. We've got a little bit more time and a couple more questions. So I think we'll go with, well, actually, I'm kind of interested in this. This is the very first question. I was avoiding it a little bit, but I'm actually kind of interested to hear what everybody will say. Where and how does someone invest money and get the best return? Jackie, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I'll start on that one. I talked a little bit about it in my section, so hopefully that gave you a little something to think about. And that's the question everybody wants. I want what's a good return too. Can you guarantee me what that is? Can't guarantee you, but you can look at history. And I'm the nerd that studied the history of the stock market and the S&P 500. So over the, if you almost every 10-year chunk, and I can't look at small periods of time because frankly, no one really knows. When someone asks me that, I'll go, hold on just a second, let me go get my crystal ball. And I can tell you what the market's going to do short term. You know, who knows why GameStop all of a sudden started trading like crazy again. It was up 100% yesterday and another 80% today. So who knows? So short term, it's impossible to know what's going to do well. But if you look at the stock market, if you want to boil it down to the most simple thing, so the S&P 500, as I mentioned, looking at the history of that, over the last 10 years, it was up 13.5%. That's a pretty darn good return. Now, you might not get that in every 10-year period, but that's a pretty big block. And if you go back 40 years or even 80 years and looked at the stock market, it always goes up, but it's not straight like this. It's like this. So you just have to know that over time, the stock market returns an average of 8 to 12%. So the stock market in general is going to get you the better returns, but also there's greater risk, right? Now, bonds are the safe thing. You're not going to get that great of a return. Over the last 10 years, they've returned 3.5%. So, but they are not going like this, like the stock market. It's a little bit of a smoother line. So you got your risk and you got your reward. So if you want the best return, you have to be willing to take a little bit more risk. And investing in great American companies, 500 of them in the S&P 500, it's probably not a bad risk to take. And it all comes down to how soon do you need that money? Because if you need it in 2 years, we don't know what the market's going to look like in 2 years. It could, back in March of 2020, that was a horrible time if you needed to take money out of the stock market. But if you've got a 10, 20, 30-year horizon, then getting stocks is probably going to be your best return and you're able to take on more risk. But as you get closer to needing that money, you're looking more at bonds or something that's a little bit safer, because if the market happens to be on a really low dip and you need that money, you're in big trouble. So that's just my thought about that.
And I was just going to add, I am not an expert in investing, but one thing that I have learned is that sometimes women tend to be a little more conservative with their money than men. And as most of us here have a pension coming, we have kind of a safety net. Like my pension isn't for me going to be enough for me to really have the retirement of my dreams, but I do have that safety net. So I can afford to take a little more risk than I might want to take if I only had my 403b.
Tara, Jessica, do you have anything you want to add to this one? I've got one more question left.
I think they both did a great job just about knowing like what your level of risk is and how you would know. Like personally, I'll just tell you right now, everybody here knows I'm 30. So I still have a long time in the market, and I can tell you all of our investments are in low cost index funds, VTSAX, Vanguard Total World Stock Market, and also that Fidelity Target Date Fund. So we have all of ours in low cost index funds because we just want to like kind of track the market. Slow and steady wins the race. And then that one target date fund is kind of similar to that. So we are not like checking every day, oh my gosh, did you see how much gains? No. We just want a nice, steady, nothing crazy, because we have lots of time in the market. And if the market goes kapooey like it did before, we don't have to panic, because we're not going to be taking this money out in this next decade. So like Jackie said, know what your level of risk is based on when are you going to need that. And that will be a big determinant in where are you going to invest that money.
I think another thing that I would add is that a lot of the agents that show up at school districts are, I'm not sure how to put this the right way. They like to tell educators how they are. And I think that this meaning, they will say, well, educators are more conservative, therefore. And I don't think that's true. I don't think educators are this or are that. I think they are all individuals and they all have their own individual risk profiles and their own individual circumstances, but it fits their narrative because it fits the product that they're trying to sell to you. And it's generally guys selling products to a mostly female audience. Um, so just be aware of that because there's really an ulterior motive there, and it also feels a little sexist. So we have. I'm going to end this with one more question because it's almost 5:30 here on the West Coast, and for our East Coasters, which is mostly everybody, it's almost 8:30. So time for a glass of wine. If you only had, is this the one I want to do? Yeah. If you only had $6,000 a year to invest, would you consider splitting that between a 403b and a Roth IRA, or put into just one?
I'm wondering if the question is mostly about tax, like pre-tax and after-tax investments, or the 403b and the Roth. So I'm assuming it's like the pre-tax and taxed accounts. I personally fund my Roth IRA first, and then any additional money I have, I put into my 403b. Like Jackie said, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what will happen in the future. But right now, taxes are at like historical lows. And even though people complain about taxes, we have, a lot of things that have been happening lately that are going to cost a lot of money and need to be funded somehow. So I'm thinking that maybe my taxes will go up in my retirement. But also, I live in a state where my pension and Social Security will be taxed in retirement. So for me, I want to have as much money where my taxes are already paid as possible. So I want to, have that money, that Roth IRA money, so that I have a little more money that won't be taxed at retirement.
Yeah, I like the idea of different tax treatments. Now, as far as the 403b, I mentioned about if you get a company or employer match. So if you get an employer match, your priority is going to be to get that match money from your employer, no matter what. So you want to get that first. Let's say if that's up to 5% and that only took like $3,000. So the other 3,000, yeah, I would probably, my next order would probably be to go ahead and put it in a Roth. And why a Roth, or just an IRA? So not even talking about the tax treatment, but an IRA, meaning it's not connected to your company. So you're going to have more investment options. You're going to have just more control over it. And you can still automate getting the money in there, like from your checking account. But it's not a real need to split it up, except from a tax perspective. And I think tax diversification is good. So that just simply means when it's pre-tax, that means it's reducing your taxable income right now. If it's Roth, that means that you do not get a tax break right now, but it goes tax-free. And all that money later on is completely tax-free. This money that you got a break on in the very beginning, and it's reduced your taxes in the current year, when you get ready to take it out 10, 20, 30 years from now, you're going to pay taxes on it. So you're either going to pay taxes now or taxes later. And if you're in a very low tax bracket, you may be paying very low taxes already. When I say low tax, maybe you're in the 10% tax bracket, maybe in the 12%. If you're in that low tax bracket, you might be better off just doing a Roth because the tax break isn't that much. By the time you take your, standard deduction, it might not be that much of a savings, but I know some people that are making big bucks. They're making, $200,000-$300,000 a year, and they want that tax break right now. So those are just two of the distinctions I look at.
I can go ahead and share. I mean, the question was, what would you do? I'm not a tax professional, and my understanding is still, I feel like, so surface level, but I do what I understand. And right now that's just a Roth IRA. So if I had $6,000 today, I'm putting it in my Roth IRA. That's what I understand. But, do your research, see what works best for you, what you understand and what you're comfortable with, and just do something.
All right. Well, that actually concludes the question and answer section. So, I mean, just loved all the answers, loved all the questions, and actually, Dan, do we have a survey that we're doing it? We don't have a survey. Okay, so I'm going to give you Dan's email address, or you have the contact information for. I think everybody put up their contact information. If you have that, we would love to hear more questions, but also more about what you want to learn about. What are the topics that interest you? I wrote down like 4 different things of events that we could put together. Everything from LGBTQ to divorce to taxes. So if there are specific events that you are interested in, that you want to learn more about, shoot either Dan or me or Jessica or Jackie will get in touch with us, Danielle or Tara. We would love to hear that. And I'm going to hand it back to Dan.
Well, again, I am just so impressed. Scott, this is already the best event we've been associated with. And I think it was the best because it was less of us. But they were just, again, there are so many great things that have happened because of 403BYs, but the one that I cherish the most is meeting people like these 4 who were the presenters tonight. They're just amazing, smart, caring people. And that is what I notice about the education profession, but also the profession Jackie was in too. It's not just educators that are awesome. I want to say that. I'm going to hand it over to Tara, who started us, if she doesn't mind, just to close it. Because again, thank you for, we're proud to know you.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to go rogue, and that's always dangerous, but pretty much we gave you information, do something with it. Like, there's no reason to ever say, oh, my husband just does all the finances. My partner does that. Oh my gosh, if there's one thing that drives me nuts. And I get it. I totally get it. And I get that it's a lot, and I get that it's a lot of forward thinking. If somebody randomly emailed me and said, do this now and you can increase your life expectancy by 5 years, that would be of utmost importance, but I'd be like, don't really feel like doing that. Just do it, because this is not something like going to the gym where you have to do something every single day. A lot of this, like your Roth IRA, set it and forget it. You don't have to keep up with it. Just do it, and don't ever take a back seat, because there's no reason for you not to be at the table, if not the head of the table. There's absolutely no reason. Women are not less qualified in any way, shape, or form. There's just no reason for it. So talk about it, get involved, and take control of your own finances, because nobody's going to care more about your own situation than you will.
And just to add on to that, Tara, I just posted 2 links to stories that detail how women are actually better investors than men. Okay. And I think with you 4 getting them started.
I was about to say, I didn't need a study to tell me that. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, for everyone who's still on the call, thank you for joining us. And again, you 4, you're just rocking it. Let's just do this again. Okay. This was just so enjoyable.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, ladies. It was an honor doing this with you guys. And thanks, Scott and Dan, for even creating this whole platform and the 403BYs. You guys rock.
Same here. And Jackie, you are a teacher, so don't say that you're not. You taught us all so much.
Okay, I just needed one teacher to give me permission. So now from now on.
Got it. You got it.
Honorary teacher.
All right. And